fuck is this thing? Is that what he did?
Yeah, he did that little rock star thing.
No, he just stole a bunch of clothes from the shelf and drove off in this fucking thing.
He did?
Yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to NYC Crime Spot. We're out here in front of the Good Shepherd Church. We're here in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. Back in Brooklyn, it's been, I don't know, like over a month since I've been back in Brooklyn. Let's go this way. Yeah, it's been just over a month or so since I've been back in Brooklyn. The borough of my birth, Coney Island Hospital, to be exact. This is a cool little church over here. Let's check it out. I think there's a front over here we'll look at. And today we're doing a little something that I've done before, but a little differently. We're talking about a little Russian organized crime today, a little Brighton Beach gangster type stuff. Now, I've covered these guys on my channel. I've went to a location where somewhat having to do with them, an incident happened, but, you know, that's the death of Vladimir Resnikov when I went to Brighton Beach Avenue in Brighton Beach to the spot where that happened. I've since done a story on Reznikov. I've done a story on Manya Elson. I've done a story on FC Agron. So I've covered these guys a little bit, but what I really wanted to start doing is going to these locations more where some of these infamous criminal events having to do with these characters took place. We got JC. We got this little, I don't know, this little dwarf thing over here. I call these umbrellas whenever I see them. I'm not sure exactly what they're called. And as you guys know, I always talk about this type of stuff. We got some beautiful evergreens up here too. Look at those. Those are really nice. Probably not native to New York. I don't know, maybe brought from somewhere at some point, planted. Not indigenous to New York City, maybe. That's kind of what I meant to say. All right. Good Shepherd School. All right, so like I said, sorry guys. So like I said, we are in Sheepshead Bay. We're heading to the address of 3001 Avenue U. 3001 Avenue U in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. Where on Monday, February 3rd of 1986, a couple of characters would bust into that building there, which at one point held the offices of Platinum Energy. Boris Nayfeld and his crew, that's where they were holding it down. Of course, at that time, he was working for Murat Balagula, who had introduced him to a lot of the lucrative schemes involving the gas tax scams and all that stuff that was going on back then. Some, you know, if you guys listen to Michael Francis for 3.2 seconds, you know, you fucking hear all about it. You know, he loves talking about that.
Stop the baloney, huh? Who the hell knew you either?
Of course, him and Gasso back in the mid-90s would sit in front of Congress and kind of unearth the whole history of it all, as well as other individuals, law enforcement, other individuals involved with Russian organized crime would speak about the etymology of the whole scam and how this thing kind of came about. But before we get into some more characters, let's maybe talk about Mr. Nayfeld a little bit. And you guys may have heard of this character. You may have seen him. I mean, his family was a part of this MTV show, Families of the Mafia or something like that at one point when he was living out in, I believe, Staten Island. Interesting looking character. Whenever I put up a picture of him, someone's always got something funny to say about the way he looks. Approaching Avenue T right here. Let's talk a little bit about his history, how he ended up over here in the good US of A, and what happened on that day in 1986. So let's talk about Nayfeld. So Nayfeld was born in 1947 in the Gomel region of Belarus, that time USSR, right? And as a kid, he would be raised by his grandparents, and he would say that his mother would leave at a young age, and his father at the time of his birth was in a gulag like thousands of miles away, because his father was a black marketeer. He was a criminal. So he'd be raised by his grandparents. At some point his mother would show back up, and he would live with his mom and his stepfather. And from an early age he was getting in trouble, you know, messing around, fighting, stealing stuff. And according to him, his mother had gained some sort of prominence within the Communist Party that I guess helped him get out of trouble anytime he was in trouble, interestingly enough. But fast forward to him in his teen years, you know, getting into more trouble, becoming a little bit of a criminal, but he would become a successful athlete. He would get involved in wrestling, he would get involved in skiing, and he would actually become a championship rower when he was involved in canoeing. And he would actually receive some press, some fanfare. He was like a burgeoning, you know, athlete, successful young athlete over there in Belarus. And at 18 years old, he would join the Soviet Red Army. And it would be there where he would really screw up, and they would put him in a penal colony for 3 years after being charged with hooliganism. That is the charge that he received, hooliganism. During his time in this penal colony, he was being schooled further in the world of criminality, being schooled by the Voryvizakon, or the thieves in law, basically the Russian mob. These connected individuals who had been in these gulags, in these penal colonies, in and out for years. They knew about crime, and this is basically his education, I guess. He gets this criminal education. And when he gets out 3 years later, he falls deeper into this criminal underworld, becoming what he refers to as a blatnoy, one who is connected, one who operates in the underworld, you know, a connected guy, I guess, if you could relate it to like mob terms, you know, Italian organized crime, a connected guy. Oh, he's connected, right? That's essentially what that refers to, a blatnoy. So ultimately, Nayfeld decides that he's going to come to the United States. Now, during the 1970s, this is something that I've spoken about on my channel, you know, a few times. During the 1970s, this is how, you know, the idea of Little Odessa, Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, is birthed, when thousands and thousands of Soviet immigrants came to Brooklyn, which is something I've talked about. You know, at the time you had the Soviet Jewry movement and a lot of things going on, a lot of efforts to get a lot of the Jewish population out of the USSR, and many of them into the West. During the 1970s, we had started seeing an influx of these Soviet Jewish people funnel into the United States, mostly like the East Coast, the tri-state area, and then that would form what we know today as a Little Odessa, Brighton Beach. That is all birthed out of that movement. Now, whenever something like that happens, obviously you get great people coming over, you get decent people coming over, and sometimes you get some very bad people, and obviously that is what happened. Now, I'm not saying Boris Nayfeld was a very bad person at the time, but he was no doubt a criminal. So he would arrive here in 1979, and his first boss, which is what we know as the first boss of Brighton Beach, is Mr. Evsey Agron, a guy who I've spoken about on this channel. Now, if you read the book Red Mafia by Friedman, he's described in that book and other places as like kind of like this brutal extortionist of his own people, this brutal boss of Brighton Beach who used cattle prods to shock people and all types of wild stuff. Nayfeld would say later that that's kind of exaggerated. He says that he claims that he's not or was not as bad as a guy as they made him out to be, even though, of course, if you mess with him, I mean, you get what you get. But, you know, was he this brutal cattle prodding extortionist that they say he was? According to Nayfeld, no. So, you know, but what do I know? Do with what you want with that information. Fast forward to 1985, Agrone is killed in his apartment building, in his hallway, right over there on Ocean Parkway. I've been there before. I'll show images of what that apartment building looks now. Now this happens after he is shot previously in a driveway of that apartment complex. Ultimately, he would lose his life on the floor of the hallway in that building. Now that is a crime that was long thought to believe to be committed by Nayfeld in tandem with future Brighton Beach boss Murat Balagula. Nayfeld would say later that in his mind, the person that was responsible for that was none other than Vladimir Reznikov. Now his reasoning for that is that, number one, Vladimir Resnikov was apparently a sick son of a bitch, mentally unwell, used a lot of drugs, known to be nuts. His reasoning for that was not long before this death of FC Agrone, Nayfeld reported that he was around Agrone's place and he saw Reznikov walking across this overpass that's right by his apartment, and he was pretty out of place. And he had approached him and said, "Hey, like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing over here? How's everything?" He's like, "Oh no, I'm just over here seeing a friend, you know." So in Nayfeld's mind, he always felt and believed that Reznikov was the one that killed his boss, FC Agrone. Who knows? But upon his untimely ending, Murat Balagula would then take over the role as a boss in Brighton Beach. Balagula, not exactly like many of the other guys around at that time that were very violent, spent time in gulags, prone to violence, and you know, he was more of a smarter guy, well educated back home, a real hustler, very intelligent, and knew how to build business and use his brain. He did not have a violent reputation. Even when he was boss, he did not have a violent reputation. Was known as more of a timid kind of character, maybe more well reserved, but not violent at all. Across the street you have Brennan and Carr, famous roast beef spot here in Brooklyn. If you guys are ever around here, you can come check that out. Right over here on Avenue U. Or don't check it out, I don't care. So Murat Balagula takes over, operating out of his place over there on Brighton Beach Avenue, the Odessa restaurant at 1113 Brighton Beach Avenue. And Nayfeld aligns with him. He teaches Nayfeld the gas business. At the time, as I mentioned before, it is lucrative. The gasoline, cheating the government out of tax revenue from these schemes and making millions upon millions of dollars. These guys are also involved in credit card schemes, jewelry schemes. I've spoken about some of the things they would do is, they would do these diamond schemes. They would go into the diamond district, some of these guys, and they would rip off their own people, some of these Jewish diamond dealers. They would do the old switcheroo with the cubic zirconians. They would come up with all types of things to do. Manya Elson was big on doing this, a nemesis of Nayfeld's at the time. I did a whole story on Elson on my channel. You could please check that out if you can. I think you would enjoy that. Now, another man who would become a nemesis of Nayfeld's and these guys is the guy I just mentioned, Vladimir Reznikov, a man who, like I said, Nayfeld would describe as extremely disturbed, a user of drugs, mentally unwell, and extremely violent. He had been questioned, arrested for the 1981 murder of Rakimil Dementev at the National Restaurant. He had also been suspected, at least by Nayfeld, of being involved in the murder, like I said, of Evsey Agron. Nayfeld believes he is responsible for the murder of Yuri Brokin, the Russian dissident author who I've spoken about on my channel.
The votes are in. Will the real Yuri Brokin please stand up? Yeah.
I always get the writers.
And he also believes that Reznikov helped facilitate the death of Yuri Brokin's wife when she drowned in her bathtub a year before the death of Yuri Brokin. So I know this is a lot of like Nayfeld thinking this, Nayfeld thinking that, but by all accounts, you know, Reznikov was seemingly a sicko. Reznikov, as I mentioned, was another guy who liked to rip off, you know, diamond dealers, and he actually went all over the country doing this. I think he was in Milwaukee at one point, he got arrested. He was in Los Angeles, I believe he got arrested. So Reznikov actually got around, you know, the whole country, traveling, ripping people off and whacking people, I guess. You know, I wasn't making money like Nayfeld and these guys who, I mean, Nayfeld, who was admittingly, you know, violent when he had to be.
I'm rob synagogue. I'm rob church. I'm rob apartments. I do it a lot of not right business.
Balagula set him up. You know, he was buying wholesale gas from Balagula. Balagula introduced him to the diamond industry in Africa. You know, he really took him, you know, to another level. And it would be at 3001 Avenue U, where we're heading now, where Nayfeld set up his Platinum Energy office, which was, you know, like kind of like a hangout social club type spot for them, but also the headquarters of their Platinum Energy office, where they were doing this wholesale buying of fuel from Balagula. And, you know, obviously, you know, I guess it was a bit of a, I don't know, dummy corporation maybe in a sense, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, this was their hangout. So let's go to what would occur at the place that we're going to right now on February 3rd of 1986. Now, according to Nayfeld, late 1985, he had come into possession of an Uzi, which he added to his collection, but he didn't really like it. It fired one shot at a time, so ultimately he unloads it and he sells it to a young individual in his late 20s, a guy who comes to him and purchases it, a guy by the name of Michael Vax. So he sells it to Vax. And Vax, like all these other guys, another Soviet emigre who came here in the 1970s, he sells it to Vax and he forgets about it, right? And that was that. No big deal. Little did he know that Vax was aligned with everybody's favorite nut job, Vladimir Reznikov. So right there it is, 3001 Avenue U. Now this side entrance faces Batchelder Street, but it's still considered 3001 Avenue U. Avenue U is there. We're actually standing on Batchelder Street, and this is the former location of Platinum Energy, one of Boris Nayfeld's hangouts, the home base of his energy company, where he was buying wholesale gasoline from Balagula, and they were doing all types of criminal stuff in here. So let's go into a little history before the events of February 3rd. Of course, we spoke about Michael Vax and him selling this Uzi to Michael Vax. Now, a couple of days before the incident that took place on Monday, February 3rd, according to Nayfeld, they would send in this kind of Russian mob flunky, this guy who he basically refers to as a nobody, who actually has a prosthetic leg, some like flunky, weird dude. He comes in here just to say hi to Nayfeld or whatever. Little does Nayfeld know he's also working with Reznikov and these guys. And he says, hey, how's everything going? Hey, let's play some cards, this and that. So basically, the guy tells Nayfeld, hey, if you guys beat me, you got to take me out to lunch this week. If I beat you, you know, vice versa, right? So this guy Felix loses, and basically Nayfeld and these guys have to take him out to lunch. So in Nayfeld's mind later on, he had picked up on the idea that this guy intentionally lost this card game so they could set up a meeting to go to lunch. So he asks Nayfeld, he says, all right, well, when are you going to take me out to lunch? And Nayfeld says, all right, we'll come back on Monday around noon, around 12:30. I'm going to be here. So what does this Chernovsky do in Nayfeld's mind? Well, he reports this back to Michael Vax and Reznikov. So fast forward to Monday, February 3rd. In come Michael Vax in the 11 o'clock hour, coming in to talk to Nayfeld. Hey, man, you know, this guy over here, he's ripping me off, you know, this and that. He comes up with a fake story. Some guy they mutually know is ripping him off. He owes him money, this and that. He's hanging out for a half hour or so, just complaining to Nayfeld, I need you to help me, this and that. In comes strolling in this Felix prosthetic leg Chernigovsky. He say, oh, yeah, we're ready to go out to lunch, you know, what's going on? So he comes in here, according to Nayfeld. This Felix guy, you know, walks inside here, and he's kind of pacing around the place. He walks down the hallway, he's kind of looking around, and then he kind of makes his way out a back entrance, and he leaves. So later on, Nayfeld would indicate that, oh, this is his way of scoping out the place to see how many guys there are. So Vax is still inside there. At around 12:15, a Nissan is going to pull up right here. Inside this Nissan, we could assume Vladimir Reznikov and another individual pull up. They would enter inside this establishment here at 3001 Avenue U, and a hail of gunfire would erupt right inside here. Dozens and dozens of bullets would fly out from two different machine guns, exploding into the walls, into the structure of this building here, the offices of Platinum Energy. Now, I'm going to read to you what happened as far as what Boris Nayfeld would say about this event. I'm going to read it to you right now.
At 12:15, the door suddenly bursts open, and this guy in a dark blue trench coat is inside. He's trying to disguise his face by wearing a dark blue hat with lowered brim and sunglasses. Zelya is the one sitting closest to the door. In the middle of this card game with my cousin Venya, Zelya turns around, startled. He jumps to his feet. At this moment, the gunman pulls the Uzi from inside his trench coat. The same Uzi I sold Misha Vax. I recognized it instantly. Zelya yells, "We're being robbed!" and throws himself forward at the guy. The gunman starts firing, a quick burst of automatic fire. 8 rounds hit Zelya. He's killed instantly, but his quick thinking saved us. He gave up his life to save our lives. As he was being shot to death, Zelya kept charging towards the gunman, and the weight of his body pushed the guy back through the office door. At that same moment, a second gunman, we never found out who, starts shooting through the window. Glass is shattering everywhere. It's complete fucking mayhem. I realize now there are 2 assassins creating a crossfire with machine guns to make sure they kill me and everyone close to me. Misha Vax is bleeding, badly wounded, shot in the chest. Vax didn't hit the floor when the shooting started, which was most likely their plan. But instead, he ran straight towards the shooting. In all the confusion, Vax escapes through the front door. When Zelya pushed the shooter out of the office, he hit him with enough force to knock off the guy's hat and glasses. He's getting ready to come through the door for a second time to finish the job. But now I can see his face really well. Without the cap and glasses, there's no doubt it's Vadik Reznikov. Time freezes. Everything is clear to me now. Now it all makes sense. Vadik murdered Evsey, and now he's trying to kill the rest of us. If any of us are going to survive, that fucking door needs to be slammed shut. If Vadik manages to get back inside with the Uzi, he's gonna mow us all down.
So you just heard from Nayfeld's mouth exactly what happened in the confines of this building. Now I'm going to put a picture up of Police Inspector David Walsh from the Daily News, who took a picture right here, and you can see that small little window is still there from the photo. Now they just changed the door to this, but I have an image of what it looked like before, and it looks like not that long ago did they change the door. It's the same door probably from less than a year ago, that was here back in '86. Now, in the back here, this is a New York Times photo from this area. They changed it. They put a fence up here, but there is a New York Times photo of the NYPD inspecting this location here. And then back there you have a back entrance over there. Now, there was a woman who lived upstairs in this apartment, 66-year-old Julia Masla, and she reported just hearing explosions going off downside in this office building. And she came down and looked at the door, and just smoke coming out, and she had witnessed a man laying on the floor, and she called the police. Now, unfortunately, Nayfeld would be hit in this incident. He would go to the hospital and survive, but the most unfortunate incident was that one of his close friends, 33-year-old Ilya Zeltser, would lose his life in this attack. He would die right here on the floor of this office building. Now, also inside this building at the time was Nayfeld's cousin, Benjamin Nayfeld, also referred to as Venya. He was also present here. He did not get hit. Michael Vax would suffer almost life-ending damage. He would be hit in the chest and the arm multiple times, and his ass would stroll into a hospital. Obviously, police would come here, ask what happened. Nobody would cooperate. 2 months after this incident, Michael Vax would be taken into custody and arrested and charged with this crime. He would never do time for it, as far as I'm concerned. Boris Nayfeld would never cooperate. Nobody involved would ever cooperate. Nobody would ever say anything in reference to this case. And this is a common theme that you see a lot with a lot of this Brighton Beach, Brooklyn mob history. There's a lot of unsolved homicides that happened in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. There was a shit ton of unsolved homicides. You know, this is a very insular community. Nobody really likes to talk. Nobody wants to rat anybody out as far as like witnesses. And, you know, a lot of this stuff just is unsolved. I mean, that's a fact. And this one, while we are led to believe this was Reznikov, obviously Nayfeld IDs him. He knows he sees him there. Obviously he knows Vax is there. Vax gets shot within this incident. Just an incredibly wild scene that happened right here at 3001 Avenue, the former location of Platinum Energy. All right, so let's head over to Avenue U. We'll talk a little more, and then we'll call it a day here. So after this, of course, Nayfeld wants revenge. He knows that it's Vladimir Reznikov, or Vadik Reznik, as he calls him. And basically, Balagula has other plans for him. He just wants him to get out of town. He's going to send Nayfeld to Africa, Sierra Leone, West Africa, to deal with some of the diamond business. He just says, listen, just go over there. We got business to do there. So that's what he does. He goes there for a little bit. Then he comes back to Brooklyn months later, and he's hunting Vladimir Reznikov. He is hunting the son of a bitch down. He keeps missing him. He hears that he's going to be here, but you know, Reznikov apparently kept getting tipped off that, listen, Nayfeld has it out for you, you better get out of here. And they just keep missing each other. So ultimately, Nayfeld has to leave town again. He goes into Germany to deal with some business. While he's in Germany, in June of 1986, Mr. Reznikov strolls on into the Odessa restaurant, tries to punk out Balagula, demands $600,000 and money that he feels like is owed to him, because he knows that Balagula is making a bunch of money in the gas industry. Nothing is owed to Reznikov. Nothing's owed to him. He's just a degenerate nut job, but he feels like he could muscle in on this kind of, very wealthy, timid guy who, even though he is a boss, he thinks that he could just muscle in on him. Nayfeld's out of town. He's going to get what he wants. Maybe I'll get him a quick extortion payment, and I'll skip town, and I'll never come back again. So, you know, and a lot of you guys know this story. I've covered it on my channel. I've actually visited the location where it happened. So Balagula basically says, yeah, man, I'll figure it out, man. Just come back the next day, you know. So Balagula basically says, yeah, you know, I'll figure it out. You know, we'll figure something out. He reaches out to his buddy Anthony Gaspipe Casso. Casso says, yeah, Tell that Reznikov to come back tomorrow. Tell him you'll have everything he needs. Wouldn't be the case. On Friday, the 13th of June, 1986, Reznikov pulled up across the street from the Odessa, went in there, didn't find Balagula, ran outside, back to his car, in front of the address of 1130 Brighton Beach Avenue, the same apartment building that Michael Vax actually lived in. And two twins apparently pulled up, and according to Casso at least, and executed that son of a bitch right on Brighton Beach Avenue. Story that many of you may know, but I have to cover it. Now ultimately Balagula ends up going away for a while. He's incarcerated for a while. Nayfeld would become a boss of Brighton Beach himself. He has spent many years in prison. He had once cooperated against Manya Elson. Into the 2000s, he would spend more time in prison. I think his last bid, he got out somewhere around 2019. I mentioned earlier that his family was on that, I don't know, Families of the Mafia show or something on MTV. I think that's the same one that Bill Catolo Jr. was on. I think it was like the same season maybe. So he was living in Staten Island at the time. There's an article some years back about him wanting to return home. He's like sitting in a pool or something looking like Vladimir Putin. And I'm not just saying that as like a, you know, to make fun, but that's what he looks like. He kind of looks like he could be his brother or something, you know? Now, as far as Mr. Vax is concerned, well, this guy is just an all-time lowlife because he has never stopped getting into trouble. After the events, you know, in Brooklyn, he is reported to have skipped town, and apparently he was living in Montreal or something like that. Let's fast forward to the year 2015. Vax would plead guilty to securities fraud in a case involving extortion, money laundering, and fraud in reference to his manipulation of penny stocks. He would have to pay back $1.8 million in restitution, and he would be sentenced to time served and 1 year of supervised release. So he would do time for this. He would have to pay back a shit ton of money. But that was not enough. That was not enough. In 2022, he would get in trouble again for a healthcare scam. From approximately August 2016 to April 2019, he, together with others, offered and paid kickbacks to marketing companies in exchange for the referral of signed doctor's orders for DME companies. DME is durable medical equipment. According to the indictment, the marketing companies were purportedly in the business of providing marketing and other business-related services. In reality, the marketing companies bought and sold doctor's orders for braces and other items. Specifically, the marketing companies identified beneficiaries through the use of call centers and used purported telemedicine companies to obtain signed doctor's orders for braces and other items for the beneficiaries. So, it is a kickback scam, you know, that's what it all equals to. They were paying out kickbacks for these companies to solicit these doctors, I don't know, to use certain medical equipment. You know, it's one of these healthcare fraud scams. Here we get in trouble for this. Now, as far as I see, I checked the Federal Bureau of Prisons website. I typed in the name Michael Vax. It looks like Michael Vax, age 67, is currently sitting in FCI Miami with a release date of February 16th, 2027. Now, I went on Reddit and someone actually has like, I'll put him up. There's like a photo of like his ID. I think it's like a weed license ID or like a medical marijuana ID, something. I don't know. There's another picture of him. I'll put it up. Shout out to the person on Reddit that posted this stuff. As I said, Nayfeld is a free man today. He's running around. Balagula passed away a few years back, not too long ago. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this little walk and talk today. And I can't say it's like, you know, really a first walk and talk for this Russian organized crime stuff. Like I said, I did the Resnikov one. I did like a walk and talk to a couple of locations for the FC Agron upload I did. I'm using some of that footage to overlay in this upload if it's pertinent to what I'm talking about. But this is a little different. This is like a very like specific little incident, I guess I'm talking about here at a location, which is, I guess, what I did with the Reznikov one. So I don't know, maybe I'm full of shit anyway. But I want to continue covering more of this Soviet, Russian, emigre organized crime that occurred on these streets of New York City, because I find it very interesting. You know, we always think about these organized crime groups, we're thinking about the Italians, we're thinking about all that stuff, but you know, there was this like other underworld going on of New York having to do with these individuals. Of course, down in like Chinatown and stuff, you had a lot of the Chinese gangs and stuff like that. That's extremely interesting too. But you know, I like this stuff. I really do. You want me to do more of this stuff? I'll do more. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys have a great week. I'll speak to you all very soon.